take you to a very familiar story about the fact of God allows us to make choices. We can make some bad choices, or we can make some good choices. In Luke chapter 15, in verse 11 through 16, it says, "And then said, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me a portion of the goods that fall to me.' So he divided them to him his livelihood. And many days after, the younger son gathered all together and journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. And when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. He went and joined himself to the citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed the swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything." Today I want to talk with you for a few moments on the subject of why not be a prodigal. Or maybe the question, why do so few prodigals return? When we talk about a prodigal, we're talking about someone who is extravagantly wasteful. It might be that of money, it might be that of influence, or that of time. You know, first of all, we can look at the thoughts of the pre-prodigal. Maybe the idea of no rules. Some young people, they can't wait to get out of their homes to where they think there's not going to be any rules anymore. Or maybe the idea of just this once. If I can just do this, just this once, it's going to make me happy. Or maybe like kids say sometimes, everybody's doing it. Or nobody will get hurt. I won't get caught. Or it's my body and it's my life. When we think about thoughts of the pre-prodigal, nobody's going to tell me maybe how to dress. Or maybe what can I watch? There was a time to where you could only watch 2 or 3 channels. I remember as a little boy having to get up and go over and adjust the rabbit ears, and there would be usually Reynolds wrap on them, I guess, to get better reception. But now, there's so many choices to watch, whether it's on TV or whether it's the internet. There's some pre-thoughts of the pre-prodigal, or, nobody's going to tell me what to watch. Nobody's going to tell me where I can go, or maybe what I can do. In fact, some have already made up their minds, and they're not going to listen to anything you have to say. Why not be a prodigal? Or why do so few prodigals return? Many do not return. One thing is, some die in a far country. Sometimes people don't want to come back. All prodigals don't end up in the pig pen. There's a lot of prodigals that are very successful, even though they've extravagantly wasted many things in their life. They turn around and they're successful again and again and again. They have no reason. They have no reason to come back. They're enjoying their lifestyle. They're enjoying their riotous living. Some are accidentally killed. Some by violence. Maybe some by suicide because they can't take what's happened within their life. An older preacher said years ago at Gardner Lane, sin takes you farther than you wanted to go and keeps you longer than you wanted to stay. Why not be a prodigal? or why don't some prodigals return? Well, we see first of all that Satan blinds the unbeliever. In 2 Corinthians and in chapter 4 and in verse 4. 2 Corinthians 4 and in verse 4 it says, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. They allowed themselves to be blinded by Satan. Maybe it's that the pleasures of sin, Moses chose the Lord instead of the pleasures of sin for a season. You know, David, he once said, I was young and now I am old. And we see what happens with people when they enjoy many times the pleasures of sin. In Hebrews chapter 3 and in verse 12 and 13, Hebrews chapter 3 and in verse 12 and 13, it says in Hebrews 3 and verse 12 and 13, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. What does that tell you? Well, sin deceives. It tells you a lie. That everything's just going to be fine. Everything's going to work out well for you in this life, and you're going to be happy. And that's the lie of sin. Maybe that of a conscience being seared. He talks about it being seared in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, like a branding iron. When something is branded, it has no feeling anymore. There's a lot of people now that just don't have any feeling concerning the gospel. Even people that have been Christians before. Maybe they pass by a church building now that maybe they used to attend. Oh, for a while it used to be they would have a feeling concerning that, about the fact, well, maybe I miss going there. Or maybe I need to go back to the Lord once again. But now they can pass it all the time without any feeling whatsoever. They can see members of the church and have no feeling. They can go to funerals many times now and have no feeling because their conscience is seared. It might be that of pride. Pride goes before destruction. Why not be a prodigal? Or why do so few prodigals return? Some want to, but they're not able to anymore. Some become alcoholics. We see over in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 29 through the end of the chapter, to where the fellow's beaten, he doesn't even feel it. And all he wants is one more drink. Maybe that of hooked on drugs. We see the Old King James Version concerning that of witchcraft or pharmakia, where we get the term pharmacy from. We had a young man here years ago that visited here at different times. And he was strung out on drugs, and he would come in, and one time he took all of his clothes off back in the coat room. Didn't even realize what he was doing. Me and one of the deacons here took him back home one day, and he was so paranoid he couldn't even go back to his house, so we stopped at one of the drug stores along the way and let him out in the parking lot. He was killed by a car just a couple of weeks later at Preston and Gilmore Lane. He was hooked on drugs. Some people want to come back, but they're just not able to. Maybe that of being involved in crime like Achan. Achan says, I saw, I coveted, I took, and I hid. Or maybe addicted to immorality like Solomon. Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 3, he started out well. We see there he desires wisdom from God. But then as time goes on, he marries 999 wives, too many. He He had 1,700 wives, 300 concubines. And he was addicted to immorality. Well, sometimes, why not be a prodigal? Well, all fathers won't forgive. That's why some prodigals don't return. Father might say, well, you've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed your mother. You've embarrassed this family. I'm not going to let you come in my house ever again. I don't want to ever see you again. And because of that, sometimes prodigals don't return. Many are begged to come back, but they're not allowed to come back. Many have lost their families through the choices that they've made. I think it's a Hank Williams song, "My son calls another man daddy." Or they come back to just one person explained it as a storage unit like. It's empty, it's quiet, it's lonely, no one's there to say, how was your day? Very sad. Even though they return, they must still live with their memories and their scars. I think of the Apostle Paul. I don't know how long he would stay in Jerusalem at a time. Seems like he always wanted to get out of Jerusalem and go other places. And I can see one of the reasons why, because of Miss Stephen and Stephen's children that he would have to look at in that congregation. And even though the fact God forgave him, still there were memories and scars of when he held the coats for those that stoned Stephen. Parents don't want their child dating or marrying a prodigal. And a lot of times you live with the paranoia. Do they know what I've done? People might not even know your name. But in your own mind, you say, yes, they know it, and they know it, and they know it over there. And they can't get over the memories or the scars. They must live with the pain and hurt they cause so many. We see different ones who cause their families great pain. David said in Psalm 51 and in verse 3, my sin is ever before me. You understand, just like my wife used to tell our children, decisions are going to have their consequences. I remember one time somebody told me about a horseshoe nail. For want of a horseshoe nail. For want of a horseshoe nail, a horseshoe was lost. For want of a horseshoe, a horse was lost. For want of a horse, a rider was lost. For want of a rider, a message was lost. For want of a message, many men were lost, and because of that, the battle was lost. And why was that? Because of the consequences of one little horseshoe nail. Well, somebody says, well, no one ever told me. Will you come to yourself, not just sorry that you got caught, but will you have godly sorrow? Understand that you might not bow before God right now, but you understand different passages in Philippians and in Romans. He talks about every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Until next week, we bid you a very pleasant good day.